7
Well,
o'clock?
I think you have to be 7:00.
All right.
Okay, 7 o'clock, we'll go ahead and get started. Want to welcome everybody out to Kaysville Planning Commission. And we'll go ahead with the first item on the agenda, which is approval of the minutes for the meeting April 12th.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Sterl.
I'll make a motion that we approve minutes from April 12th, 2018.
Second. Aye.
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 Okay,
Hey, Anne Marie, do you have to flip that switch or not? Or are we going? Oh, sorry.
okay, we have the first conditional
Who wants more hits?
permit for a major home occupation for a contractor at 752 West Christopher Circle for Ryan Butler.
Good. Okay, yeah, we'll cut in a little closer. Test. So just as Mr. Butler's coming up, I'll just quickly give an introduction to the location. As you can see in the packet and on the screen, the property on the end of the cul-de-sac just off of Christopher Circle is hoping to just operate as a home business for contractor services. I met with Mr. Butler and visited with him, and mostly it's office type use, again, scheduling appointments and so forth. But based on my assessment of the property with the amount of parking, garage space, and so forth, any stuff that might come on site, there seems to be ample space to handle and take care of that. He's here to speak with you, have any questions on the business, and I'm happy to field any questions myself. But ultimately, staff's recommending approval without additional conditions.
Okay, hi there. Do you have anything to add?
No, that's
No? Okay.
So then, most of the tools and equipment, trucks or trailers you use, you can fit in your garage area. And
Yeah, easily.
okay. All right, that's really the only concern I had was storage.
I will move that we grant conditional use permit, major home occupation B contractor for Mr. Ryan Butler at 752 West Christopher Circle.
Second. Aye.
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 I guess I'll abstain.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a conditional use permit for a major home occupation for group music lessons for Chris Harmon at 2013 West Phillips Street.
Oh, go there.
Aye.
So Chris here, met with her, who's also doing a home business. It's in one of the new properties in Hill Farms, just off of Phillips Street. It sounds like she's done this before, but is new into Kaysville, and so just getting the license set up at this particular location. The item of note, because primarily, and she can speak to this, it sounds like it's individual one-on-one lessons, piano, voice, but there is the occasional quartet or small group ensemble that she'll work with. And anytime we have a group, we're required by ordinance to put a limitation on either the vehicles or the number of students that are coming. It was a little bit before she and I were able to connect, so just based off my kind of guesswork, I put in 6 as a recommended limitation within the ordinance. Sounds like that likely would work, but there's the occasional group that's larger. I think it could be appropriate to consider additional students based on the Planning Commission. So if you'd like to maybe ask her for additional details on that. I think it's pretty common that we'll do groups of 12. A lot of these are people coming carpooling together or kids walking to the property. So that's the one condition. She's okay with having that, but I think the number is probably up for discussion. And with that,
Okay,
I'll pass it along.
Thank you. Let's see, does it have the hours that you're going to do it?
Private lessons, sometimes I have, the earliest I usually have it is 6:30 in the morning. Not all day. Before they go to school and after school till about 6.
That makes sense.
So with your group lesson, you do private and group, it sounds like.
I just have 2 groups and the rest are private.
How many are in the group?
Right now, I've got one group of 8 and one group of 10. The most we've ever been is 12.
So you got 10 and up to 12.
So do the parents drop off and come back and pick? Or do they
Yeah,
have to
they're
park
younger
and wait, or-
students, so they're not driving their own cars. Some of them walk, because some of them are already students from my neighborhood, and otherwise the parents drop them off and pick them up.
Have you been doing these group lessons currently
Yes.
at your current location?
Yes.
Have you had any concern, have any neighbors expressed any concern about the traffic, or?
I haven't. I actually talk with my neighbors on each side, and then the neighbors across the street. Across the street, it's a long side yard, which is kind of nice. So, and none of them have had any. They've all thought it was fine.
What about recitals? Do you have recitals? And how many
I
do you
do.
have?
I have about 5 recitals a year, but I have them at Kaysville or Layton Library.
Oh, okay. All right. So with the traffic, that's probably my biggest concern on Phillip Street there, and then Hill Farms Lane right there. It's not a lot of parking area. What's the most cars you've had out there at a time, would you say?
I probably 4.
Usually 4, and they just park on the side of the road, typically, or?
Yeah, across from me. Well, I've got in front of my house. I've got my driveway. Across from me, it's not the front of someone's house, it's the side of their house. It's quite long because the destination homes are quite long. I mean, I've never seen it, but you could probably fit 6 cars along that area. But the most I've ever seen is 4 because people just don't arrive at the same time.
Well, they're not staying there either, right?
No.
They're dropping. It's momentary.
Yeah.
See you later, Johnny. Sing your heart
Yes,
out. Come
exactly.
Back. I'll pick you up in
And
2
some of
hours.
them walk, you know.
Okay.
Do you have a period between so you wouldn't have overlap of picking up and dropping off?
Yeah, there is.
I guess with the limitations that staff has put on it with 6 students, it sounds like where you're 8, 10, and the most you've had is 12, that 6 would probably hamper a little bit of your business.
I think it would.
So,
Could we recommend 12?
Yeah, that would be appropriate. Just
Do we have
More.
we don't have an issue with that as a body here, do we?
no,
I think that's fine. They're being dropped off.
Yeah.
You don't have 12 cars parking in front, which would be a concern.
And with recitals somewhere else, that's not really an issue.
Right.
Yeah, that would be the biggest.
And maybe a restriction where you don't have 2 group lessons
Back to
sequentially.
back, yeah, they're on different days.
Okay.
At least a half hour apart or something.
Yeah, they're different days. So.
And then, so the way these conditional use permits work is if there's a concern with the conditional use, if there's a complaint, or if something's not working out, usually the staff will hear about it, and then we can bring you in and adjust it. So if the 12, that's double of what the staff had put in as as a kind of a initial starting point. So if the 12 is too much, then we'll probably hear about it, and we'll have a chance to talk about it
Yeah.
and see if we can make other
Sounds
changes.
good.
Are you ready? I'll make a motion. I'll move that we grant a conditional use permit for major home occupation B group music lessons for Chris Harmon at 2013 West Phillip Street with 2 conditions. One, that there's no more than 12 students at any one time and no back-to-back group lessons.
Second?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Let's see. So we're on yard care? Maybe? What?
Oh, I was just gonna give it to you.
I don't know what happened to my yard care.
You want this yard card?
Sure. Oh, no, I found it. Okay. We have a conditional use permit for yard care and pest control for Steve Burke at 22 East, 100 North.
okay. So, Mr. Burke, this is the last of our home businesses for this evening. Lives just on the bend there at 400 North, and the home occupation. It sounds like he's done a variety of tasks in the past and got quite the few large skill set and things that he can do. But essentially, he's looking to pick up maintenance of some yards. So it'll be typical lawn mowing, trimming, yard care type work. But is also licensed through the state to handle pesticides commercially. So would spray occasionally that as well. He does have a location on site to store those, so they're dealt with appropriately. And then also, kind of separate from that, the whole yard care component, he's held in the past contractor license to do drywall, and has done that specifically for years. He doesn't expect that that will be the regular occurrence of the business, but figured we'd add it on there. It's just something that may happen, because if he gets a call and someone's willing to pay him a buck, he may take a job now and then putting up patching, essentially drywall, and doing that. So based on my visits with him and review of things, feel comfortable recommending approval without additional conditions. And there we go. And he is here in the back this evening as well, if you got questions of him, and I'd be happy to take them myself.
Could we modify, I mean, this is just a technicality, I guess, if you're going to do drywall too. I mean, could you modify this to yard care, drywall, or yard care, handyman services, and pest control? I mean, does that really matter? Probably not, right?
I don't think it hurts to be specific like that, and that way you know it's very, very clearly what the approval is for.
Then if you hear a complaint, you know, oh, well, I saw him moving drywall around, then they only said yard care and pest control, and, I mean, you know, so.
Okay.
Is Mr. Burke here? Would you like to come up?
No, the name's real familiar when it came through. I thought he's been here before, and I
I've
thought
been
we'd
here
already
before.
granted a handyman.
Yeah. I think
Have we?
I have not Steve Burke, not for this matter.
Oh, okay. But you've been here, haven't you? Why was the name so familiar?
I think we've seen him because the
I've been
development
here
just
enough.
adjacent.
Oh, right.
Oh,
yeah.
I wonder if that's what it is.
And you had your glasses on, too, I think.
I've
They
been
think
here
you're
for
throwing a
years.
curveball.
Yeah, I was going to
He's
say
got a
that's
disguise.
All right, that's what it is.
disguised. So,
Right.
One question I had, do you have a license to do the pest control?
I do.
Can you use commercial grade pest controls?
Yeah.
So, okay. So I assume that they'd be under lock and key.
Yes. Yes.
The shed will have a lock. That's what that was
Oh
going
yeah.
to be my
yeah.
okay.
It'll be a small amount. So
how often does I know this isn't really our business, but how often does the state do they?
it's
Monitor or
every,
check or-
every 3 years relicensure.
Okay. All right. I don't have any issues with it.
No, I don't either.
So I'll go ahead and recommend we approve a conditional use permit for major home occupation B for yard care, handyman services, and pest control for Steve Burke at 22 East, 400 North.
Second.
Aye.
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 All right.
Aye.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Okay. We'll go ahead and do a public hearing and request for a rezone. Oh, sorry.
We've got one other item before
Sorry,
that, Madam
thank
Chair, if we
you.
can.
Okay, we'll do an extension of a conditional use permit for the development sign located at 85 East Crestwood Road.
We'll get to the main event soon, but yeah, this conditional use permit's one you've seen before, right next to what we were just talking about in the backyard, and it's probably referenced. That may be why we recognize Mr. Burke. I don't remember for certain, but there is development occurring on this property. The Planning Commission approved a year ago for signage just along the frontage. It's been up. They're in compliance, but it was granted for 1 year at the time. That year's come, and so they're just looking for an extension as they're just getting ready to start the homes and continue that. The request is an additional year, and I was put in my stipulation that or until the homes are built and sold, whichever comes first. I believe I saw the property owner here. Again, if you have questions of him or myself, I'm happy to take them.
So the one question that I had, and just for the record, I voted against this, the sign, the everything from the get-go on this, but my concern was, maybe this is more for staff. So as I drove by there, there's also a sign that's adjacent to this one that says site work by Cab Construction, Ogden, Utah. It's approximately, I didn't get out and measure it, but it's approximately 4 feet by 4 feet. It's been there for quite some time too. What's the stipulation on that?
Yeah, so the ordinance actually
Oh, yeah,
defines these
there it
as
is
two
right there.
different sign types. So the actual advertisement of the property and the for sale of the lots is considered a development sign by ordinance, and that's what requires a conditional use. A construction sign, however, designed by, being built by, those types of things are just permitted during ongoing construction projects. It's based on the frontage of a property, but I believe they can be as large as 96 square feet in size. And so, a little silly that we're permitting one and not the other, but just the way the ordinance separates them and distinguishes them. But yeah, ultimately, I'd suspect they're probably going to be up. I think CAP that has that is, and I may be wrong, just doing the site improvement, so the road, utilities, and so forth.
The civil works.
But there may be other contractors that come in after that are building the homes, and likely they're going to put up signs of who's doing that construction.
So the conditional use permit then only applies to the developer themselves?
Correct.
All right.
Question I had on it, and I didn't bring my book, the ordinance book, but the line of sight, does that meet the requirements for it, where it's located right now? It almost looks like it would impede the turning, the right turn as you come down and turn into that.
It's something I could double check and have moved if necessary. Honestly, I didn't go out and measure it. I've not driven up the lane where I thought to check on that. It may be close. I think that was an item we kind of talked about originally as well, as making sure it was out that 30 feet.
Yeah, when I saw that was the only
Looking
thing
at
I
it, it
wondered
probably
about.
looks like it may be within that area.
Yeah.
So we can have that relocated if that's cutting into that.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'll move that we grant an extension of the conditional use permit for development sign for Buffalo Properties at 85 East Crestwood Road.
Second. Second.
Aye.
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 Nay.
Okay. Now we'll go ahead and do a public hearing and request to rezone 25 acres of property at 700 South Desert Drive.
And just as way of introduction, as the public's probably getting ready to speak on this. So this is a large chunk of ground just south of Boondocks. It's currently zoned general commercial, 25 acres in total. What's before you this evening, Ivory Homes has submitted a request to rezone the property. What they've put in for, at least to start a conversation, based on my talks with them, was for the entire property. And they are considering the RM zoning district, that's residential multifamily. The RM zoning district essentially allows densities, it's the most intense within Kaysville, of up to about 15.5 units an acre. So for the consideration of the Planning Commission, currently the way the property would be permitted to be developed is essentially office, retail, type uses, quite a variety, but no residential at all. So this would be a shift to where only residential and no longer commercial users. There are no commercial uses permitted other than home businesses in the RM district. The second part of the request is the PRUD overlay, and you've seen that before as a commission. What that is it allows for some flexibility in how the development looks. If they want to do private streets, if they want to do lots that are townhome configuration where it's owner-occupied type lots, a variety of things that may come about that. In your packet it states, again, your considerations for that. If you think that's going to get you better development than the RM zone might get just alone, that would be the reasons for considering that. It is, of course, a legislative action, so it's a preference game on this one. You've got discretion on what you think is appropriate, what you like. If you can justify one way or the other that it works or it doesn't for the area, just give your reasons with your recommendation. And based on how you feel that it fits with the general plan, that language has also been included with your report and consideration of housing or commercial developments. In either direction you go, and again, based on the input you get from the public and the applicant this evening, staff recommends that it at least be done because of the size of the property and the potential impacts through a development agreement with some pretty specific direction on how that may take place. So again, as a commission, you could decide, yeah, maybe the RM zones, or at least make a recommendation to the council that the RM zone's appropriate for all of it. Maybe it's appropriate for 1 acre. Maybe you've got some stipulations within that will give you the RM zone, but nothing more than townhomes or so many units per acre. Really, it's your opportunity through the rezone process to determine what you want out of it, to set some parameters and work with the applicant on that, and that would be whatever those parameters would be based on your findings. We'd recommend that you take the opportunity to go through that process. Probably with that at the time, I'll turn it back and let the public hearing start. The applicant is here to address it. I believe they're expecting probably to speak after the hearing, but if you'd like to hear from them first, I'll leave that up to you, Madam Chair, as your option.
I was wondering if perhaps we could have the representative, or they've got flexibility with that. If you would like to come up for a few minutes and say something, and then perhaps after we've had the public hearing.
Evening, Commission. Is this on? Brian Prince with Ivory Development, 978 East Wood Oak Lane in Salt Lake City. Appreciate the time tonight. I think I'll give some context to my application to better the conversation. The property is owned by America First Credit Union, and they've owned it for quite some time. It's been marketed for sale for about 6 years, off and on. Ivory was approached in 2014 by the property owner. We looked at development opportunities and decided not to move forward based on feedback we got from staff in 2014. As of late as last fall, the property owner and their real estate broker reached out to me and asked if Ivory had interest in pursuing a potential development again. And I said, under the condition that I get some feedback from some elected officials beforehand. So earlier, about 6 weeks ago, I met with the mayor and a few council members and got some feedback on under what condition and zoning designation would there be support for a rezone. And the feedback I got primarily was that the RM zone would be supported under 2 conditions, primarily no multifamily, and that this development would have to include a component of a commercial use. It couldn't all be residential. We would have to end up with a design and a development that included 4 to 5 acres at least of some type of commercial use, preferably retail.
What do you picture that development to look like? Is it going to be 2-story? Just
and so I think what we envision is no multifamily. I'll make that clear. No multifamily housing. It's all for sale product. What that is, we're not sure exactly.
So townhome, condos, but it
would be
RM.
townhome or detached lots, single-family lots or townhomes. And I'm not here tonight, I'll be honest with you, necessarily for a vote. I would really like some feedback from the commission on how to approach this, because I know this is not an easy application to digest and internalize.
Then is it okay? We'll go ahead, unless you have some questions. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing and get some comments, and we'll come back and talk to you.
Yeah, I'd like to discuss a little bit more about the vision, but I'm happy to come back.
Okay, thank you. Probably should have opened it, but I'll go ahead and open the public hearing now for any comments on this matter.
That's good to hear what he wants. I think it's good to hear it so that people know what we're talking about.
My name is Brian Altum. I live in the first cul-de-sac straight south of the property. About a year ago, we had a traffic study done on Deseret Drive. Deseret Drive averages over 1,200 cars per day. On those, there were probably, I can't remember the specifics. I don't know if Andy remembers, but there were more than a dozen cars. The speed limit's 30 miles per hour. more than a dozen cars through that week on that traffic study were going 60 to 70 miles per hour. And nothing was done, no crosswalks, no four-way stops. Nothing was done about it. Now we're proposing putting 375 more homes, which could include 2 to 3 drivers per home to drive on Deseret Drive. I think there's a public concern for children's safety. Even if you put third-acre lots on there, there's 75 homes going on there. That's still increasing a lot of traffic on Deseret Drive, and there needs to be something addressed with traffic.
Thank you.
Georgina Dufour, and I live just west of this area. And my concern is the ingress and egress, getting in and out of the neighborhood there at 6th West and 2nd North. It's backed up quite a bit of the time, especially on busy hours in the morning and in the afternoon, evening. And adding that many more homes and cars, as he mentioned, would just increase that traffic jam that we have right there now. I just think it's way too much saturation for the land.
Thank you.
Hi. Whoa. I'll just speak loudly. My name is Alan Bott. I'm at 740 West Peter Drive, and I'm a neighbor of Georgina and Marvin. And I just want to echo what Georgina said. That's the concern I have is congestion. If you look at the way you get you get out of there and you get in there, it's railroad tracks or through neighborhoods. And all we're going to do is create additional congestion. That's the concern.
Thank you.
My name is Brent Palmer. I'll just talk loud too. I live on 912 South Windmill Drive, so it's about a half a mile south of Boondocks and then just west off of Deseret Drive a little bit. So I had a quick question. I thought he said there was no multifamily housing that's going to go on there. Is that how you phrased it?
Yes.
Then why would it be rezoned as multifamily dwelling then? Does that open it up so they could change a plan and throw multifamily dwelling on there? So, because the multifamily dwelling, of course, would bring a lot more traffic. This past Saturday, I was headed north on Deseret Drive, went over the railroad tracks towards the park and ride lot. Traffic was backed up from 200 north to those railroad tracks. People were flipping U-E's just to try and get around. I didn't see a train in sight, so I have no idea if a train had gone 2 minutes before I came or what, but traffic was backed way up. If you add another ton of cars there, traffic is going to be even a bigger problem. It'll force people to go down Kays Drive and wind through that neighborhood to get to 200 North on Kays Drive and 200 North so they get a traffic light. I'd hate to be those homes through on Kays Drive where you're winding your way through there because people roll through stop signs. They go a lot faster than the 25 mile per hour speed limit because they're in a hurry to get somewhere. But again, my concern was why rezone a multifamily dwelling if there was no multifamily housing that was going to go on there. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Callie Kunzler. I'm at 702 South Windmill Lane, so it's right on the corner. Kitty corner would be technically kind of my backyard. I just want to echo the words of concern about traffic. Deseret is already a very fast-moving street despite the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Most people don't follow it. And it does cut through our neighborhood. So our neighbors are across that busy street. You see plenty of children crossing the street. We've had quite a few horns right outside our window, and I stop and look out. There's cars flying towards kids and things like that. So it's already a concern that I feel like needs to be addressed in another meeting or something another time. But I just wanted to echo my concern of adding additional drivers coming in and out of that and would support a single-family zoning, but the multifamily would be very concerning for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Wade Watkins, my address 749 Peter Drive. Just as you come out of Boondocks, I'm right there. So I get the hot rodders coming out of Boondocks onto Deseret Drive and then trying to go 60 miles an hour down Deseret Drive behind me. But again, my biggest thing is what's been said before, is the congestion. Trying to get on to 200 North. I leave at roughly 7 o'clock in the morning to try and go to work. That's high school time. And so it's almost impossible. There's routinely 10 to 15 cars backed up trying to get onto 200 North. They're right by the park and ride lot. And so everybody just heads off through those other neighborhoods. This is just going to make it worse. So we've got to figure out something traffic-wise.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I wanted to, before we close, I just wanted to say that we did receive some letters from some of your neighbors as well. Traffic was one concern that many of them had. Also, there was one that talked about the commercial aspect, that Kaysville does not have that much commercial, and to give up the commercial for residential concerned them. So, should I close it before we have him come up? Okay, if there's not anybody else, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and we'll open it up for discussion. Do you want to come back up, please?
I had a few issues with this. Now, granted, so we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 folks talk, and then we all received the same emails and that too. Granted, I don't live in this area. I can certainly echo your concerns with traffic and congestion and things along those lines. But and not to say that my question, or my concerns here supersede that. In no way am I implying that. But in looking at our city zoning map, when I received this, and actually I've known about this for a couple of weeks now, there's no RM currently anywhere west of I-15 in Kaysville. None. Zero at all. Granting this would certainly set quite a large precedent with that. Probably moreover, though, this 25-acre parcel is the last large congruent area of underdeveloped or undeveloped. We as residents and homeowners and taxpayers and stuff, really like to piss and moan about how, sharing the tax burden and why is the onus of responsibility always fall on the residential taxpayer and things along those lines. And I feel very strongly about wanting Kaysville to attract more commercial development, more of a commercial feel. Smith's is a huge success. At first, it was not really well received across Kaysville, but now that it's been here for a number of years, we look at it and we can say, that was a pretty big success story. To see this rezoned so we can put $500,000 houses on it and carve out 3 or 4 acres for commercial usage, I don't, personally speaking, I don't like that idea. And again, too, the RM zone too. I mean, and to echo the concern of, who was it, Brent Palmer, and a couple other folks too, with a residential multifamily zone, when you have no interest at all in putting multifamily there, correct? I mean, that's what you're stating, at least
Correct.
right now.
Correct.
So why the RM zone, I guess? But I think giving up a 25-acre chunk of land that's zoned commercial right now, I don't know. That's something tough. That's tough to let go of.
So I've got a few thoughts on that too, but I'd like to hear the rest of what he has to say, though.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So again, the property's been marketed for quite some time, 5 or 6 years. The current property owner has been trying to attract a commercial use. They've been unsuccessful in doing so, and I'm not going to. I haven't come tonight to tell you why they have not been successful. I'm here to tell you about my vision. The vision is 20 acres approximately of a residential use and 5 acres of a commercial use. We've identified that commercial user and are working on an agreement with a single tenant, a single user for that 5-acre commercial space. And to answer the question why the RM and PRUD, I think the plan was to have the flexibility to design something that would have our intent, our envision is a townhome or a smaller single-family home product, a cottage lot product, something like that. And the conversations I had with the mayor and a few of the city council members was exactly that. Ivory, we're open to supporting this, but you're going to have to commit to no multifamily, and a component of it has to be commercial. And I'm open to, and I'm committed today to developing and drafting a development agreement that specifies, that provides a master plan, provides density parameters, provides product and architecture, so you know exactly what's going to be done there. And that's how we've pursued this, is based on the feedback we got from the mayor and council members. In regards to the concerns and questions that were brought up, I think the traffic is a legitimate concern. In the event that this was ever developed as a general commercial property, it's very fair to say that would generate a lot more traffic than a residential use. Again, the RM is, we could look at a potential other zoning designation. And talking with Lyle, the PRUD is intended to, I think, probably guide us more towards what we're looking at, which would end up in we're not sure the density, but I'm happy to, based on your feedback tonight and really more data or information you'd like to see, come back with a more specific design. I thought I'd start with getting your guidance up front before we dial it into something very specific.
How many units are you looking at putting down? Because there's a difference between multifamily and then if you do townhome, condo, or detached, it can still have the same feel as a multifamily. So how many units are you looking at putting per acre?
So we would not look at doing any type of condo or multifamily, if like for rent or for sale condo product. It would be a townhome or a detached product, anywhere from 7 to 10 units an acre.
Just apologize for the interruption. I just had a comment that it's still pretty hard to hear, so as we're all talking, just get really close to our microphones. I'm probably not doing any better.
So you're looking 7 to 10. Is there anything around that you would compare this to, that you could say this is the look we're going for?
I do. I can't think of anything that is in this immediate area. I'm happy to come back with some very specific examples of what that product, the housing product, and the subdivision design would look like. I'm happy to do that.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the development in Fruit Heights on Nichols Road, is that Ivory?
It is.
Yes.
So that has pretty high density on 200 North Main Street. If I'm hearing you, the multifamily element of that development would not be in existence on this one, but there is some single family components of that with smaller lots. Are you envisioning some of that single family element or something a little more dense than the single family elements of that Nichols Road development, but not quite as dense as the multifamily part?
That's a great example, and I should have thought of that. I wasn't thinking about it because it does have a multifamily component. So Orchard Farms is a great example of what we envision there, minus the large multifamily apartment buildings. And so you could drive through there, see the look and feel, the types of homes, that density. That would be a good analog for what we envision here. It certainly would not be an affordable product. That's very hard to deliver in this market, in this location. But it would target a different buyer, a buyer that wants to move back to Kaysville or stay in Kaysville, but is looking for a little bit of a different lifestyle, wants a new home, needs to downsize to a main floor living, wants to get away from a big lot, or wants more square footage on a smaller lot. And there's a big demand for that, especially in this market in Kaysville that is really lacking that type of housing.
So you said not affordable. I mean, that seems a little incongruent in my brain with what we're trying to do. So what do you mean by
Well, what I mean by that is I think the typical reaction when you show up to Planning Commission and propose those types of densities, well, the developer's trying to cram as many units in there as possible to get the price down and sell as quick as possible. We'll try to deliver a product at a price point that's as attractive as possible.
Like what?
I don't have a specific design yet. I would hope to deliver, if it ended up being single-family lots with single-family homes in the 300s, which is very hard to do in this market with commodity costs and land costs and labor. But that would be the target.
Well, 300,000 is affordable, though. I mean, heck, West Kaysville is littered with 500,750,000 plus.
And so I'm saying not having a design for the subdivision or a clear vision of what that product would be. That's the general idea, the vision. Whether we can do that, I'm not sure.
Could you go back to the Google? Well, I'll give you a couple of my thoughts on this.
Well, do you have that concept plan?
Because a couple things. I think that there's very legitimate concerns about the traffic going down the road right through here. There already is. Whatever happens, there's going to be traffic. If it's residential, if it's commercial, if it's a mix between the two, traffic is a given. It is going to happen. So we've got to try to mitigate that however we can. If it's through different type of traffic controls or whatever it is, I'm not a traffic engineer, but that's a given. There is going to be traffic with development, no matter what development happens. And from a commercial standpoint, I mean, I'm a commercial real estate guy, so you think I'd be promoting, a lot of commercial. But one of the challenges you have commercially in here and why it's been vacant so long, undeveloped, it comes down to location with this, I think. You're not going to get a Smith's, you're not going to get a major retailer or anything like that. You've got 1,200 car count right now versus, I don't know what 200 is, but it's probably, 12,000? How much?
Yeah.
23.
Yeah, they're looking for a heavy count like that. Anything that drives people from a retail standpoint, that's never going to sustain it here. You've got the entertainment up there at Boondocks, which is a destination type place. So this is either going to be a destination type place for some type of entertainment commercial, or you're going to have what we've got just to the north of it with some of the new development there that actually is nice. It's not. It's taken a while to get there, and it's kind of more a mix between I'm going to say manufacturing or industrial kind of feel to it. But to find those tenants is hard. That's why it's been there, I think, undeveloped for so long. And chances are you might be able to do some spot things in there over time, but me personally, I'd like to see a mix probably bigger than what you've got. You're talking 15 or 20 residential, 20 acres of residential and 5 acres commercial. Commercial does bring more of a tax base and helps relieve some of that burden to the residents. Plus, most of the tax base that comes from our property taxes goes to education. Very few of it stays within the city. So we do depend quite a bit on commercial for some of our tax base. But me, I think a good mix. If you had a good mix, maybe the south end, and I'd say, 10, 15 at the most acres residential, and maybe try to get 10 to 15 commercial up here. If you could something that maybe complements what we've already got. And then from a residential base, I'm not crazy about the RM zone, quite frankly. And I would like to see a development agreement if we proceed with this, and I'd like to see the architectural styles and a master plan of it. But I think 25 acres or even 20 acres is going to really task that area. But that's what I'd like to see. And I think if we do that, it does kind of fit within the general plan from highest and best use and what this property is. I think time's kind of proven it's a challenging spot. But I think it's going to be hard to do, multifamily like we've got through the rest of the neighborhood. Otherwise, somebody would come along to try to do it anyway. So I don't think that's going to be a viable use. So I think maybe higher density for a portion of that's probably appropriate use mixed with some commercial into it. To get a balance, I think we need a good balance, and the general plan does allow for those type of balances. So I think we need to go back to the drawing board on this thing and kind of reconsider it and come up with a proposal that's kind of a win-win for everybody involved. That's my take with this.
So you're saying a more, Commissioner Bullock, a more specific design, which we haven't. I've got a general design I can show you tonight, but a more specific design. So here, I'll show you this. So.
And that's the commercial spot right there that you're looking?
So the potential buyer tenant here we're talking with, and it'll be a single user. They've asked for 5 acres. This concept is showing 4, so we'll have to enlarge it to 5 acres. So and how it's accessed, we can work on that. It could be accessed over here or a cleaner subdivision road that we're not committed to yet. And the remaining would be a residential subdivision.
See, I think that needs to come straight across. I would hate to see that become some of the multifamily or not multifamily, but some of the housing that you're proposing. Mm-hmm. They have the freeway frontage, but they don't have street frontage, and then all of a sudden you get traffic that's coming through here that's going to impact the residents. I mean, we're already concerned about the residents around with the traffic count. Then you add more in here, and then if you got a through street going into a commercial use through a residential neighborhood, that's a concern.
Yeah, and it could be either way. We could put a separate road, separating the residential from this commercial use. It's just a kind of a preliminary concept. But what I'm hearing from you is you'd like to see a more specific design along with some product examples to show you exactly.
And a little more commercial. If you could put some more commercial components into it, if there's some complementary commercial uses that you might be able to put in, or I just think 20 to 5. I think we need a little more commercial and a little bit residential. I think we need to draw a really good balance in that, and look at how it's going to complement the city, complement the neighborhood, meet within the general plan, and help,
and Commissioner
relieve
Bullock,
some of the concerns that the residents have. But I think growth is inevitable here. It's going to happen. But what kind of growth? And so we've got that opportunity to help kind of shape that and help figure out what we're going to do there.
That's great feedback. You said you're a commercial broker. In your professional opinion, what type of use from a commercial side do you think would work here?
I think it's going to have to be some type of destination-driven type place, something kind of like boondocks. I think I don't want to see like a car dealership or something like that there. I think we've got some other spots, even though that's a great economic driver to us, but I don't think that's an appropriate spot for it. Or maybe even buffer between here and some of the residential with maybe some professional buildings, dentist, or even then it's still probably not the most desirable location for them, but something that might give a little bit of a buffer. I'd like to see some green space in there too.
And this does not do a good job of showing that open space. There's obviously that power corridor right here, so this would all be open space, and we'll detail that on the new concept plan.
But that would almost be unusable green space. I mean, it's abutted against train tracks in the I-15. I mean,
But it can be landscaped and it can be used
sure,
from residents.
I realize that.
Landscape along there, there maybe some other green space throughout. But I think that there needs to be a buffer too, maybe a little more commercial with some type of a buffer, even if it's some type of commercial use buffering it.
Are you at liberty to tell us what kind of tenant that you're talking with, the commercial tenant?
We're really close. I can commit to by the next meeting. I think we'll have an agreement in place where I can speak openly about that. And I'd hope to have that partner here to speak to their vision.
Is that commercial potential tenant? Are they going in with some expectations as to what they're going to be surrounded by, residential or?
They're very familiar with the site and to describe their use. Commissioner Bullock is right on point. It would be a destination user, similar to a Boondocks, to where it doesn't heavily rely on traffic. It's a destination location, and they're really looking for that exposure to I-15. Would the commission be open to an office use here?
Yeah, office use is going to be a challenge over there. That's primarily what I do, and it would be a challenge. You could do a professional type office that may be a specific type user, but I think that a nice single story professional type office building might go good. Maybe as even a buffer or a frontage on it.
I would like to see something more revenue generating, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, if we're going to put, there's plenty of professional opportunities scattered throughout Kaysville, especially over on this side of I-15. I mean, if we're going to have commercial in there, well, not if, when, or however. Pardon?
They can't hear you again.
Oh, geez, nobody can hear me. Well,
Boy,
what's up with our mics here anyway? I don't know what's going on. All right, anyway, so, all right. I would like to see more of a commercial a component to this, to echo Commissioner Bullock's statement. And I'd also like to see it a little more tax or revenue generating. Professional buildings are great, but
yeah, they don't generate it.
No, and like Commissioner Bullock said too, I mean, it is all about location. And I do, on what I said, leading this off and stuff here, I do realize the location of this is certainly not, in the best interest of a commercial venture, and I get that. It's kind of tucked out of the way. But, in 80-20, or what is it, to have, 20% of this commercial and 80% of it residential? I mean, we bump those numbers up, things along those lines. I don't know.
Well, I had a comment on location. We've only had Smiths and Maverick for a little while. I think everybody thought West Kaysville was not the place to take commercial. But with those being open, I think the trend could be that it could happen more down in that area.
I think that raises another question, though, and maybe for staff. It was mentioned that a traffic study had been done on Deseret Drive. Do we have statistics from that? Are there any plans in the works to improve that corner there by the mill, the backup? I mean, all of this, every single person we heard from, every single email was traffic. We're going to be running over kids, the typical bad things that happen with traffic.
Right. Because I agree. I go down 200 North every day. I drive it to get to I-15 in the mornings, and I come back on it westbound, and it does get pretty congested. You can get backed up pretty high, and I see the traffic coming in, so I'm very aware of the traffic, at least on 200 North. I don't take Desert Drive or the other one, but
that development's going to happen at some point.
That's what I'm saying. It's going to happen, so we've got to figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah, it's almost a distinct issue because it's
the intersection though that's at the base of the viaduct. I mean, that's about as wonky as it gets. There's no light there, and then you have your view is obfuscated as cars are come waterfalling down off of the overpass, and then it backs up there at the, at the on-ramp, and
So
there's a
then,
lot
can
of
I
stuff
just
going on.
synthesize the question
Go
here
ahead.
to Andy? I'm curious to Andy. What are all, if any, of the future road improvements to a number of things? And this is just that I see. Burton Lane overpass, Deseret Drive, the intersection of Deseret and whatever that street is down at the end here past Tri-City Nursery, by the city building.
Old Mill.
What is the development or road improvement, traffic improvement plans for this corner by the parking lot, Park and Ride? And what are the plans, if any, for the expansion of the overpass at 200 North? How's that?
Good.
Yeah.
That's pretty all-inclusive.
We're aware of those issues, as has been mentioned. I'm trying to pull up the Google Earth of that vicinity. Deseret Drive, as you'll notice, is a wider street than the other streets in the neighborhood, and it has no houses that front it. That was done intentionally to be the collector for that area. That's where the cars are supposed to be going. It's expected to have more traffic. The issue at 200 North in that vicinity, which we understand, and we've done some work on that as well. We've had some contact with UDOT, had some discussion on this. You can't put a signal at 600 West with the signal at the ramps because they're too close together, they don't coordinate well, and then you got people stopped in the intersection, and it even makes a worse situation. We've discussed some potential options with UDOT, turning this ramp into a frontage road so that it comes down here and then ties into the road, so that the ramp and the 6 West function as the same facility to a certain point, and then they can turn off the ramp or go on the freeway. We think that would be a pretty reasonable solution. Obviously, it costs a lot of money, but it is on the radar. We're currently in the midst of doing our capital facility plan for transportation. It will point out some of those other issues that you mentioned, the intersection at Old Mill Lane. That could be on the radar. It hasn't been to this point. There's simply not that much traffic there currently that it's been a big issue. Obviously, the train tracks are there. I don't envision that the city's going to spend another $20 million to grade separate Old Mill Lane. Typically, the trains do much better than they used to. There are more trains than 10 years ago, but trains don't stop like they used to. We used to get trains stopping on 2nd North for up to a half hour, 45 minutes of time, not allowing any traffic to go. We did address that with the bridge. I'll mention on the bridge itself, you've heard the story for a long time, but the federal requirements, the federal project is now closed out. We have a project in design right now to restripe the bridge to 4 lanes. It should be done within the next 6 weeks or so. That'll alleviate.
Cheers for that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it sounds like, Desert Drive was designed as a wider collector street, so it's designed for a higher load, but speed's an issue. So somehow you'd have to control speed. So it sounds like speed's on Desert Drive, but it's designed for more traffic. The real bottleneck is when you turn on Old Mill and 600 to get to 200. That's where it bottlenecks and jams. So even though we've got a wide collector come down Desert Drive, it just just bottlenecks in, and so that's
And it's really the intersection at Second North that creates most of that issue.
is where so if you can double that, but then maybe look at I don't know on speed. I don't know how you stop people from speeding without. Yeah, tickets. Maybe. Problem with speed bumps is snow
you can do
removal.
road design, not speed bumps, but you can. There's a lot of traffic calming things you can do, but on a street that looks like that, there's not a whole lot you can do to slow people down. But
Can I interject, please? Part of the traffic study, some of the suggestions that me and my wife met with Andy, we suggested putting a four-way stop about a half mile south of this proposed property. There's kind of a blind corner near that LDS church. Yeah, there are no homes in front Deseret Drive, but there are homes on both sides of the property with children crossing where cars are going 40 to 60, 70 miles per hour. So yes, there are no homes fronting there, but further south, the traffic study was done near that blind corner with cars going 40 to 60, 70 miles per hour. And there are multiple blind corners further south. And we were told that we can't put stop signs because that would push more traffic to Sunset Drive or 80.
So they would cut through the other residential neighborhoods to.
Right.
So yeah.
But something needs to be done. I've crossed that street. I go on runs near that church, and running across the street, I check both ways. I stop, look, and as I start running, a car comes south, and I have to dodge out of the way because they still, even though it's a corner, they don't slow down. The speed limit's 30, they're going well over that. And they won't put a stop sign there, they won't put a stop sign at the northern intersection of Deseret Drive and Country Mill. There needs to be some traffic calming solution, especially if you're if they add third-acre lots. That's more realistic to me than adding 7 homes per acre, and that's more acceptable. But there still needs to be something done with traffic calming.
Thank you.
Well, so Andy, I don't think you. At least the one question that I still had was, sounds like there isn't a whole lot really that's going to be expanded on in terms of right-of-way on Deseret Drive, and there really isn't anything you can do there. But what's the plans, either short-term or long-term, for Burton Overpass? If there are any.
Burton Overpass, the structure itself is the responsibility of UDOT. It is an aging bridge. It's been there for 60 or 70 years. I don't know that it's on a list at this point to be replaced, but it would be at least getting close to that point. I wouldn't hold your breath that you'll see it in the next 10 years.
So that means, let's just assume that there's going to be no increase in capacity on Burton, at least in the next 10 years.
I would say that's a correct statement.
Meaning not capacity, just meaning the ability to handle more cars, right, more lanes, or
It'll
whatever.
It'll stay as a 2-lane road for the foreseeable future.
Right. Okay. Which means, I mean, what that really I think means is, if it were bigger, it might alleviate some traffic on Deseret heading north. People who might go up north on Deseret up to 200 North and then over somehow would just say, "Oh, I'll just go across Burton because it's nice and there's lots of capacity." But that's not going to happen now because it's not going to be there.
It's kind of a domino effect too, because they're going to go up Burton Lane out to Main Street, so then we'll get the residents in this neighborhood complain about increased traffic, or they're going to go down the frontage road and up Shepherd. So it's traffic's a domino.
Well, so let me just talk about traffic. The things that I see that I wanted to raise, or questions I had. What we're really saying here, and it's kind of been alluded to. If we just assume for a moment, setting aside the marketability of the property, if we just assume that this property will at some point be, if not rezoned, be built out fully commercial. I think it's safe to say there's not going to be a large retail user there, so we can take that type of a commercial use off the table. But there are some certain types of commercial uses that would eventually fill in there if it stayed completely commercial. The question that are totally permitted uses as it stands. The question then is, if we make that assumption, what would that traffic burden be compared to the one we're looking at now? And I don't think we know fully the answer to that right now.
No, it's
and so
pretty
that would be one
subjective.
suggestion I have in conjunction with creating a more refined plan. We would need to see what type of traffic burden there would be. And actually what it would be helpful, if I'm only speaking personally, is you would say, okay, hypothetically, let's put our commercial developer hat on and we just threw a site plan down of the various uses of what we think would work here, and then maybe even get a traffic engineer to opine very roughly of what the daily trips would be generated if it stayed zoned as is, and then compared that to what it is you're proposing. And hopefully for you, yours would be less, but your burden of what you're proposing would be less. But that would be a very useful comparison to see if it in fact is going to be more traffic, then yeah, those are legitimate concerns. But if what you're proposing is going to be less than what would already be permitted there, well then it's actually better in the traffic perspective, because it's going to get developed somehow. We need to know what the difference is between what it's going to be developed currently versus what's proposed to be developed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Traffic's not the only concern, though.
Well, I know it's not the only concern, but that information would very much inform our decision with at least respect to traffic, which is a very big concern. Everybody raised it, and it is a very valid concern. Yeah. But what I'm saying is we have to have more information to really know if it is in fact different than what could go there now.
You know, residential counts are, I mean, you can calculate those fairly easy. Commercial is so subjective because you don't know what is going to go there.
And that's why I say they'd have to put their commercial developer hat on, and we would have to they would come in here and they'd say, this is something that we think could work commercially, and then we'd have to say, no, that's not viable, or we'd say, okay, that's pretty close. It just will at least give us something, is what I'm saying.
I don't think traditional commercial, it's going to be, maybe 10 years down the road. It's a tough development, quite frankly.
And okay, let's say it is 10 years down the road. The fact is, the roads aren't going to change that much, and it's going to if it didn't get rezoned, it's going to stay commercial, and eventually it's going to get fully built out commercial. The question is, when it fully gets built out commercial, what's the traffic burden, or what's the traffic load that generates versus what's going to be proposed?
I think where he's saying that they're really close with somebody, and he might be able to disclose who that is, next few weeks or month or whatever. Yeah. That'd give us an idea of what type of thing. If it's a traditional commercial, traffic count is going to be fairly comparable, I think.
But if we just had a rough estimate, it would alleviate most of the concerns.
So if it's comparable, then we don't rezone it, and their concerns are all the same, and they get the concern. The traffic's going to be there no matter what.
Yeah, because if it's typical commercial that's got employees, and you got a tenant base, and they're coming and going. They're coming in the morning. They're going out for lunch. They got runners and deliveries. FedEx, UPS, different things like that. The traffic, at least in my experience, it's pretty comparable for traditional office, or traditional commercial use versus residential use.
And what I'm saying is I personally would like to see more information so that we can more accurately decide if this in fact is going to be more of a traffic burden. I don't know the ansur to that right now. Yeah. I
think we're waiting for them to come back to us.
I think traffic, if it's comparable, I would still like to see a higher, a percentage split. Not just from a traffic standpoint, but even from a tax base.
Yeah, there's other concerns.
And other concerns, but traffic seems to be the biggest one. And, so I think, my recommendation on this is, I'm not making a motion right now, but we're nowhere near ready for a vote.
And I don't think,
and
I think we're just giving information, yeah.
But I think we don't want to deny it yet, because we want, I think from an economic development standpoint, it's important to continue the dialogue. So I think, it's tabled and pushed back with some recommendations to you on what you need to bring back to us. And so like Commissioner Sunlaw saying, we get a better feel for what the development is, how it's going to look, how it's going to feel, what kind of use is going to be in there, what kind of, traffic. It's not just cars, but if you got standard commercial, you're going to have deliveries. You're going to have bigger vehicles. So I want to get a better feel. I want to see what it's going to look like and how it's going to feel. And
oh, go ahead.
Well, I mean, a similar question to what I was illustrating with the traffic is the tax base question too. And I think we're making an assumption, and it's probably a safe assumption, but what I'm saying is we also need to see, and maybe this isn't very easily quantifiable in the hypothetical or in the preliminary stage, but I would like to see the difference in what revenues would be contributed ultimately to the city based on what is going to be proposed by Ivory and what would come in under just a marketable solution under the current zoning. If as we are all thinking, it's a safe assumption that the commercial zone as is fully built out would bring more tax dollars to the city than this is, then that's a concern. That's information I think we need to know. We don't know it right now.
But
If in fact,
I think we also have to look at the time value. It's been for sale for years. We're getting nothing off a vacant lot. If we develop it now, as opposed to waiting another 6 years, then who cares if we're going to get more off a commercial lot if we can get something now?
Yeah. That's where I'd be interested with Boondocks. I'm sure they generate a whole lot more in tax revenue than an office building, than general, standard, typical, general commercial use. That's where I think something destination, something, considerably more than that. And if you had something that creates some synergism and is complementary and also is going to add and conform to the neighborhood and whatever the look of residential is going to be, that's the kind of commercial I'd like to see there versus a manufacturing building or a warehousing building.
I agree, but I'd rather see something there than it sitting empty for another 10 years.
Don't get me wrong. I'm in favor of some type of development there. I think this is good. That's why I don't want to kill it. I want to continue the dialogue. I just want to see what it's going to.
Well, as we're doing that study or thinking about the cost and revenue, it's not just property tax. If you get a light industrial, the personal tax that those tenants or those companies pay often exceed what the property tax is.
Yeah, this year the state legislature, they just increased the amount that you can have before you have to claim personal property. I think 2014 they raised it to 15 or to 10,000.
But I'm talking hundreds of thousands, on some of those things.
If you want an industrial fill.
Well, there's also business tax abatements and tax breaks and stuff too. When a business comes in, or when retail comes in, or whatever, it is kind of a lucrative, an incentive. We'll give you a tax break for a number of years, and I will admit, that obviously doesn't happen to a residential builder. You don't buy a home, and Kaysville City's not going to say, oh well, since you bought a home here, we're going to give you a tax break for the next 5 years. So. Some kind of an understanding. But how long of a time frame are we looking at here? Until you are prepared to have. We've given you a lot of ammunition here this evening.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. This is exactly what I wanted. That's why I thought I'd come before I dialed into design. And Commissioner Sunlaw's feedback is very helpful. I've already started talking to Hales Engineering, which is one of the lead traffic engineering firms in this market, about doing traffic impact study, and we'll have them do that. My only concern is I'm nervous about making assumptions on the commercial use for that comparative analysis. Because if I come back and have made assumptions that the commission doesn't think are viable or relevant, then that undermines the analysis. So I may reach out to staff and maybe Commissioner Bullock for some feedback on what assumptions. I want to be conservative on the commercial land uses that we use for that traffic study.
I mean, I think that's right. You have to just make your best guess on what would be marketable there, what we see happening there in the next 10 or 15 years, and then if we as a commission or ultimately the city council thinks that those are outlandish assumptions, then we would have to weigh whatever number you were attaching traffic-wise to those assumptions.
So City Creek, probably not.
Right. I mean, I think you would just look. I think you would just look. I'm going to use this. To the business park up north. Just with my layman's hat on, it's got to be something similar to what's going on up there is what's going to happen down in here. I mean, it's not going to be exact by any means, but I'm just saying that's what I see coming in here. It's not going to be a big retail use. Those are already existing somewhere else. It's going to be sort of an office type, maybe industrial manufacture with like some retail on the. It's going to be the Kaysville Business Park type of use. That's just what I see coming in here. So if we make that assumption, what traffic does that generate versus what would be proposed on the rezone? What's the different number? That's my question.
That's great.
Started talking, he said 15 units per acre, and then since he's come back up, he said 7 to 10 units per acre. You put 10 units on an acre, that's a teeny house. That would be comparable to the other houses that are in the neighborhood, even just straight south of there. I think there should be some requirement that whatever the housing portion is, whether it's 10 acres, 15 acres, 20 acres, whatever, it should have to be similar to those across the street and south. It doesn't make sense for me. Those houses that butt up against the railroad tracks are just fine. I don't think they should be able to go in and do multifamily housing just because, hey, we can make more money that way. I think it needs to be similar to everything that is right around it.
Well,
and I can go back on the traffic thing. One other point. I'd rather have local traffic than commercial traffic come flying through there. I think those of us that live there take a little pride in the neighborhood and go 30 miles per hour and not 65 miles per hour down the road. I mean, I'm sure there's crazy high school kids that do, but I think you have a better chance of people obeying the laws that live there than those that are coming in.
So you'd rather have more residential than commercial?
If it's similar to the houses that are there, I'd rather take the pride of home ownership than people flying through there to get to a destination.
Well, that's something. I mean, we don't even have it. We've got some little plat thing with this. That's about as ambiguous, and I mean, I don't even know what that is.
Well, he's told us it's ambiguous.
Well, no, I know
we're not
that,
relying on it.
I totally get that. I fully understand that, but I would like to see. I mean, we can talk about this all night, but I would like to see something with a little more teeth.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that.
I guess coming a little more prepared may have even been a better idea too. I mean,
I came for feedback, and that's what I got.
Right,
so I appreciate your
right,
feedback.
Sure, right,
Sure. Let me just make a comment because I think that this might address this. Well, I think this will address a comment that Brent made initially, and maybe relates to the one you just talked about, which is what I'll call the bait and switch argument. Like he's here saying all the right things now, and then Ivory comes back and changes things. And my answer to that is that's not going to happen, in my opinion, because a development agreement is going to say exactly what they're going to do and what the city council or what the planning commission would recommend the city council do. And so they're going to be locked in. It's going to be a contractual agreement that they are bound by. Whatever is in that development agreement is what's going to get put on the ground.
It has to.
Right.
The look,
by definition.
the fill,
right. The aesthetic, everything.
Density.
So all those questions would be worked out, I think. And so like Brent, if to your comment, make it look somewhat similar to what's there if it was a residential use, if that's what the commission or the city council ended up doing. I think those would be questions that are worked out and then ultimately put into the development agreement, so there's certainty all around about what's going to happen.
I'll make one comment. I never said we proposed 15 units an acre. That was Lyle clarifying that's the zone. But I have no intention on proposing density that's the same across the street. It will be much higher. Like I said, it'll be 7 to 10 units an acre, and I'll come back with a very specific design that can be an exhibit to a development agreement that would lock in and define, my vision and the parameters in which we'd execute that development.
And again, just put a fine point on it. Whatever that comes back with, I just want to see, and I readily am admitting it's going to be a ballpark number. I want to see the traffic numbers based on that proposed plan versus what we assume would come in under the current zone. Give me a traffic number comparison.
Got it.
Can I make a comment too? I realize we're talking about the rezone, potential rezone of this one property, but I think we're missing part of the point. We talk about Deseret Drive and the traffic. It's wider, it's designed to have higher traffic, but we're not addressing the issues on both ends of it. And I think that's one of the bigger problems, and why this property and the others have had a hard time being developed, is because even though that road is supposed to potentially use that or handle that traffic, the roads coming into and out of it don't, and there's no timeline to be able to fix that.
But we did discuss that.
Right.
Again, you're exactly right, that we're looking at years down the road.
Yeah, and regardless of the development that happens, that is an issue that has to be addressed.
And frankly, that's not before us right now. We're right. I think we've devoted a lot of time to that, and I think it's been helpful, and I wish we could solve some of these problems, but that's a different issue than the rezone, yeah.
And honestly, if somebody came and developed it commercially tomorrow, there's not a darn thing that they have to come to us for.
Yeah,
they just
can
start
do whatever they
developing
want.
it, and here
Big
comes the
fat
traffic.
Walmart would,
So we're trying to address some issues that really aren't relevant to what we're doing,
Yeah.
but we are hoping that we
this-
can answer some of the questions.
Yeah, and this gives us the opportunity to
at least discuss it.
address it, and put in place.
Now, I think based on
development.
what's being said here, I don't know that we need to go on a whole lot further with the discussion, and we should probably make a motion to table this. Do we want to table it with certain instructions that we have a traffic?
I think we've outlined things pretty.
Yeah, I've got it. I really appreciate the
Okay.
feedback tonight. Thank you so much.
If that's the case, then I'll make a motion that we table all of this.
I second it.
Sorry, I don't know how to describe it any better than that.
You may aye
Okay.
at first.
Aye.
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 Okay.
Can I just make a comment
Thank
to the citizens? It might go without saying, but of course we're just recommending. So when it does come back, we're going to have another discussion. We're going to work through the details, and then we're going to recommend what we think the city council should do, whose ultimate decision it is. And then the second thing I'll say is, we like to be a little more informal here, which I think it's good because we like feedback and things. If you go to city council, I'm pretty sure you're going to have one chance to speak, and you're not going to get to speak again. So just FYI.
Make it count.
Yeah.
Well, and notice we didn't take a vote even here, so we're still open.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we have another public hearing and preliminary.
Vote on that motion to table it?
Pardon?
Did we vote on the motion to table it?
Not yet.
We did.
Yeah, we
did.
We did. That's right.
It was unanimous.
Looking for
Sorry.
the next item, sorry.
We did.
Wait, we did. No, we did.
Okay, we have a public hearing, preliminary and final plat approval for Madsen Meadows subdivision, Lot 3.
If you recall, at the last, those of you that were here at the last meeting, we looked at the same property. They were requesting a variance because they had not wide enough to make a double flag lot on this property located out on the south end of town, as you see here. They apparently listened to your advice at that meeting, went and talked to the neighbor, have a deal in hand to acquire the required square footage to make this fully legal. That makes it available now that we can review the final plat, the preliminary and final plat. They did get the 36 feet here. I believe the deed shows about a 51 square feet of property was what was needed to get this into compliance. The two lots both easily comply now with all ordinances and issues for this area in this zone, and so we're ready to recommend a preliminary and final plat for Mads Meadows Phase 3 subdivision.
Thought this was a good example of things working with the right discussions and a few things, so.
I wish we didn't have to have the discussion over 1 foot 9 inches, but I'm glad it worked out, I guess.
Oh, yeah, we're opening the public hearing if anybody has any comments. Okay, we'll close the public hearing.
And wait till we get to the next one. That's 1.6 inches.
Yeah, I was really, really happy when I saw this.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, damn, that was fast. That was quick,
Yeah.
man.
Well
You guys-
well done.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah,
So,
good job.
so could you just make a motion on this now?
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll make a motion that we grant preliminary and final plat approval for Madsen Meadows subdivision, Lot 3 amended for Doug and Farron Nowak at 1833 South, 200 West.
Second. Oh,
I'll do it. We're neighbors.
there you go.
Gary,
Aye.
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 Aye. Great job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for staying for this. Hopefully it was worth it.
Good job.
Okay, number 6 is a request for a variance for section 1712, 6 single-family residential district lot.
Hopefully you guys are getting really good at these variances. I missed the last one, but I listened in on it, and it sounded like quite the discussion.
Variances appear to be getting smaller.
A little tricky,
smaller,
huh?
Smaller.
So
3 inches at a time. Yeah.
this particular one, again, the same thing, looking at it from kind of the quasi-judicial type of approval. And you got some pretty specific, very specific criteria that we're looking at. Based on who's still here in the room, I won't go over those, but they're in your packet. The 5 criteria for qualification of a variance. Essentially what the applicant has submitted for your consideration is he's looking for the ability to put in a detached garage. He's on a corner lot just north of Shepherd Lane, right over the overpass on the west side. And if you can go in, Andy, to the next exhibit. Right south of them is Benchland Water District. They've got some easements across the property as well as a pipeline that you can see there as well. Because of that requirement, it's pushing the shed that he's hoping to put on the east side of the property a little bit further north than probably would otherwise prefer that we would allow closer to property lines. In so doing, it encroaches into the setback requirements. So where it's a corner lot, there are 2 requirements to consider. One of those is a 30-foot front yard requirement, and the other is a side yard against a public street, which is required to be 20 feet from the property line. The dimensions that he's shown us on this plan are measured from the sidewalk. So 21-foot line is 20 feet. So usually the sidewalk's 1 foot away from the property line. And so the other 30-foot line that he's showing is measured at 31 feet. Anyway, that's the same as that side yard setback. Because the home, again, we're talking about that 1 foot 6 inches. It's 29 feet 6 inches from the sidewalk. That's going to be 28 feet 6 inches from the property line. So this yard is a 1.5 feet shy of being able to be considered a front yard. So it's technically his side yard. This yard is now the front yard. And so this yellow line that's shown on this plan is where the shed should be so that it's not sitting in the front yard. He's saying that he could build it as desired up to that purple line, which is still 20 feet from the property line. One of the comments that I just listed in here, on a corner lot, doesn't matter where the front door is or the back door, we have ability to interpret the ordinance on which one's the front yard or the extra side yard. So in this case, we're looking at, and I believe his letter talks about a 10-foot variance, and perhaps that's the way that it ought to be considered. But an alternate way to at least look at it, if we consider this a a variance to this and call this a front yard, then you're just 1.5 feet off. This is then a side yard, and it would actually be compliant with that line. So just items for consideration. I'll let them speak. They are here this evening to show what they're doing. And then, as you're aware, the state statute outlines those criteria for a variance. The onus, again, is on the applicant to prove why they believe they qualify. And should you concur, please be specific with your approval. If there are any conditions that go with that, and that's appropriate and allowed as well to mitigate the allowance of that variance. And if you have questions through the process, we're here to assist you with that.
And then just one kind of unique thing on a variance. In the packet, 1746 has under sub 2 the 5 factors or 5 requirements that you have to find. If you could just in your motion make a finding that those are, if you grant it, I'm not suggesting one way or the other, but if you decide to grant it, you should make a finding that all of those have been satisfied.
Were you aware of the 5 stipulations, the 5 criteria? I'm assuming. Do you guys want to come up? Sorry. So were you aware of the 5 criteria that this has to meet?
Yes, at least what I interpreted that from what I read.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I tried to address them the best I could with the knowledge I had.
Yeah, right. No, I get that.
So if you didn't, and I assume you didn't, if you did, I would say props to you. You should have watched the video of our discussion of our planning commission last meeting, which was I think 2 weeks ago. The people that were here just before you requested a variance last meeting, and we had a very robust discussion. That the summary of which is variances are virtually impossible to grant in a situation like this, but we don't like to say no when we're talking a matter of inches, literally inches.
Right.
And so we tried to work out some other solution for them, and thankfully it looks like we did, and that's why they came back. I'll just say it's hard for me to look at this right now and grant a variance for at least a few of the 5 criteria. So now I'm trying to put on my solution hat and say, what other thing can we do to let you do what you want to do? Because it makes no sense to argue over 1.5 feet. I have some thoughts, but that's where I'm at right now.
I echo those same concerns. I mean, you are right. I mean, there are a handful of these 5 that we wouldn't be able to grant it under because all 5 have to be met. So, I mean, you would be disqualified just on, I mean, there's like I said, there's a handful of these that would meet that. But again, I mean, to have this off by even less than the last one last week by 3 inches, right? Yeah. So we have to try to manufacture some kind of a solution, a positive solution, a positive outcome here if we can, and be able to move this forward. So
I think the one that's the hardest for us is number 5, where it says the spirit of this title is observed and substantial justice is done. The spirit of it is, it's 18 inches. Let them build it. But we need to come up with a different solution, because while that makes sense, what we discussed 2 weeks ago was, where do we draw the line in the sand? And when we draw it at 1 foot 9 inches, what happens when somebody with 1 foot 6 inches comes?
Right.
Which I believe was a direct quote from somebody in that discussion, and here it is 2 weeks later.
See, the way I interpreted that, the spirit was, you're doing it for safety reasons, aesthetic reasons, things like that, correct?
Right. I actually think number 5 is the easiest one for me.
No, that's what I mean.
I would say 5 is the easiest one to give in your favor.
That's the one that causes us the most grief, though, because it makes sense to do that one.
No, the one that causes me the most grief is number 1.
Yeah.
Because, as we said last time, you cannot
That's the one that trips us
you cannot self-impose the hardship.
No, you're right. You're right about that.
And I think that's in case law.
It is and I will just say it is my fault that I didn't, when I bought the land,
Yeah.
I bought a half an acre, thinking I'll have the room to do this some years in the future. I've been
Yeah.
there for, 11, 12 years? It was my fault. I didn't do the research. I just figured I have this huge area over here that
Which I think
unused area.
I think
Now
I think
can use it.
everyone in your shoes would probably do a similar thing, and that's why I want to say, okay, how can we throw you a bone and help you work this out?
Yeah, so the shop, are you building it for hobby? Is it for employment?
It's just a hobby shop.
Wrong
and
answer.
Also, something
You're
I've
building
done
it for
my entire life
for
to have
livelihood.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm a car guy. And
Or livelihood.
And the dimensions are set. You can't.
Well,
I want it big enough I can
It
put a
doesn't help,
trailer
yeah.
inside of it. I mean, if it's not going to work, I'm going to have to sell and go somewhere else. I'm not going to give up on my dream because of a variance.
So maybe Andy or Lyle could remind me here. So we had a discussion, it's probably been several months ago now, where there was two homes really close by each other over, I think, by Endeavor Elementary. I could be wrong.
There's Centennial.
That had the sheds in the setback. They were corner lots, and we were saying, well, what if we gave some leeway in the ordinance, wrote in some leeway in the ordinance that would solve problems like that, and perhaps solve problems like this? Because honestly, this is what I'm getting at. The only solution I see is a change in the code, a legislative decision to change the code, because I personally can't see it ever passing a variance.
Yeah, so from that discussion, we've been taking several ordinances through, and so that's on the list of things still to work through. We have had some discussions internally trying to figure out the solution to that. I think some of the thoughts have been maybe buildings that are under 200 square feet, under a certain height, that don't require building permits, might get some leniency in those areas. They tend to be less impactful.
So this one
but
would
it
probably
could
be
include something such as this. Yeah, there are any number of measures maybe that could be taken, but frankly, it's just not
I'm just saying, I think
dealt with to date.
I think where I'm at on this, for not only for you but for the commission, I won't vote in favor of giving you a variance, but what I would suggest to you is work with staff to try to get some discretion written into the code so that the staff can use your discretion to say, yes, this fits within there is some ambiguity in the code now that the code's been changed, and so we can approve this without having anybody else look at it. But what that means for you is you have to go through the process to get the code changed.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. What I see is I've got the easements there on the south side of my property, and they're hard and fast. I can't make them move the gas line or the water line.
Right.
No, and
I have a third of an acre that is basically useless.
So when you say you don't see that happening, what exactly don't you see happening?
I don't see how. I mean, how am I supposed? I'm not a legislative type person. I don't know what I have to do to go through to change the code.
Yeah, well, and so I guess I guess I'm not putting the burden on you.
I don't have the money to hire a lawyer to do.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want you to do that. If that's not the solution I'm talking about, by the way. For me personally, I would suggest to the staff find a way to write in some ambiguity into the code so that this doesn't have to happen.
So
That's the marching order.
I'm with him because our hands are literally tied on these things. We have to meet every single condition, all
Per the
5
letter.
of them, per the letter. We can't have any really leniency in it. But I think I specifically remember that because when I was looking at this, I'm going, I remember that conversation we had with those 2 other sheds. And I think that not every situation deems, there should be allowances in certain situations and circumstances. In that particular case, I thought, one of the sheds was perfectly fine. It didn't impede. It didn't get in the way. It just happened to be the way it was situated with the neighbor's house, and so I remember that discussion very well. Is maybe there ought to be some way that we can change that code so that there's allowances. The challenge we had, if I remember right, though, was how do you write that where you aren't interpreting every single variance or every single shed that comes. But I totally agree that code does not fit every single solution and every single circumstance that comes along. I think there needs to be something, and so I'm in agreement. I can't see how to make all 5 of these fit, but I also think it's kind of ridiculous.
I mean, it could be as simple, and maybe this is a question or a comment for Nick, but the staff gets applications all the time, and they look at the application, which would be or a proposal. Okay, you come and say, I want to build this shop here, and the staff has to say, okay, let's compare what you want to do with what the code says you can do. If they meet up, then green light. And what I'm saying is right now we look at the code, and the code says you can't do what you want to do, so you're either left with a variance or change the code. I'm saying variance doesn't work, so change the code, and it could be something as simple as adding in a paragraph, or not a paragraph, a sentence that says, that just gives the staff some leeway in exceptional circumstances. And those exceptional circumstances would be just that. They would be the exceptions, very minimal. That would be a discretionary decision on the staff.
How about large, irregular-shaped properties?
There you go.
Well, there you go.
Something like that. But that's actually even too narrow. I'm saying giving something even broader than that. That the staff can say, okay, in our discretion, no one's going to care about this. No one's ever going to appeal this decision that we're making as a staff. It's never going to see the light of day, and it's going to let someone do what they want to do with their property. So let's exercise our discretion that was written into the code and allow this. That's what I think should happen.
Maybe what you could do is, or have some of those that would allow them to do the discretionary if it meets this, this, and this, just the 3 that you mentioned.
And we've discussed that as a staff. Some neighboring jurisdictions have what they call a routine and uncontested variance, where the applicant goes through a process, and as we've discussed it internally and kind of vetted it, the difficulty is when does it become routine? When is it uncontested? How, just like you guys have said today, 1 foot 6 inches, then tomorrow somebody comes with 1 foot 9 inches, and
that could be, those parameters though could be outlined and defined by you, staff.
Sure.
Not because we can't do that. We can't say, well, if moving forward, we will grant variances in Kaysville if they're if the issue is under 2 feet. Or, whatever.
Put it as a conditional use.
Well, I'm saying I don't even want to, and this is just my own opinion. I wouldn't even want to put the variance moniker on it because it potentially triggers these 5 criteria, possibly. I'm just saying. Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. The staff makes discretionary decisions all the time. They have to say, does this meet the code or not? If they say yes, then they stamp it with approval and it goes on. That's kind of their discretion. They have to decide, they have to weigh the proposal with the code and say yes or no, does it meet it? If they say yes, it meets it, and it moves on. When someone disagrees with that decision that the staff makes can be appealed.
Correct.
And so what I'm saying is make something in the code that allows the staff discretion here, and if someone disagrees with it, then they can always appeal it. But in the vast majority of the cases, the one we had last week and the one we have now, no one's going to appeal it. And it's just going to go, and people are going to be able to do what they want to do with their property. That's what I'm saying needs to be written into the code. And I'm not hoping, or I'm not suggesting that you need to fight that fight. I think you'll be certainly interested in the fight or in the discussion. You'll be maybe at the meetings and such. But I think that's something that we as a city can tackle without putting the burden on you or your neighbors or anybody else to pay the money to pursue that. So I don't know.
I like it.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
So where it goes, I guess, is, as much as I hate to say this, we essentially deny the request for a variance, but yet we
say all is not lost.
All's not lost here. You know, you're not selling your home tomorrow. You're not putting it on the market.
No, nothing's going to happen over the next.
No, I realize that, but I think that there is, given the conversation here, and given the fact that this isn't a complete, I mean, meeting these 5 criteria is so binary. I mean, it's either on or off, it's black or it's white, it's yes or no. And I really think that there's enough shade of gray and some ambiguity here that we, you know, I don't want to speak for city staff or our city attorney, but I think, you know, based on what we've discussed here and based on what this particular situation is, I think that there is some leeway, and I think that there's a way to manufacture a positive outcome for you and your desire to build on your property.
Can I shift gears a little bit? So you've checked on these easements, and you're not allowed to build over the top of them?
I'm sorry, say that again?
You've checked on these easements? You have, it looks like 2 or 3 easements?
Yes, one's a big pipeline with Mountain Fuel that runs right down the old Shepherd Lane. My backyard, that whole, it's the southern part there. It looks like a road. Yeah, right there.
Yeah.
That is the old Shepherd Lane before they built the overpass.
And is that something that you can't build over the top of?
Yeah, one of the things I gave you has a rough estimate, a rough drawing. It's about 12 feet from the property line is the gas line. And then about 4 feet from it, further north, is the Water District's secondary water line.
Are these above ground or what?
No, they're both buried. But they told me when I moved there, they gave us a thing and said that we had to be 10 feet off of the line for natural gas. And I was told 5 feet from the other ones. So
Yeah.
which is about...
I just say, and I haven't looked at it, but some easements don't prohibit you from building over the top of it, or if you did, it wouldn't be a problem. But the other option, like this, the matter that came right before you, is that they used some property or bought some property from the neighbor, and it sounded like you have a neighbor that wants to have the shed in there.
Right.
And is not really using that land. So maybe just being creative with what you have is another, maybe there's some other alternatives that can make it work.
Well, he can build it where it is
looks
if
like that's
he
what I'm
gets this, right?
Gets what?
If he gets this foot, he can build where he is there.
Yeah. But
That's the variance we're talking about.
that's the variance.
No, it wouldn't, without a variant. I mean, if they somehow do make that.
Can I just throw something else out there? Can you expand a little bit, either the aerial or something? Okay, well,
What do you want?
one with the building, that's fine. Correct me if I'm wrong, and I admit that I might actually very well be wrong here. So the way we're reading the code, this is the backyard,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Well, Andy, is that right?
That's correct.
What's the setback in the backyard?
Accessory building, you're pretty open.
So in other words, it's
still
a
has
triangle and it's a small building and it would work for you. But what I'm saying is, we could squeeze some triangle, funky shaped building in this corner here, and it would fit the code, which makes no sense.
Yeah.
So
He still has to have the 20-foot setback from the road, side yard abutting.
oh, because
street
it's a
is
corner.
10 foot.
Right.
That's
So
where I
it
was
has to be
wrong.
20
Okay.
feet.
So in other words, it's a triangle back in here. Never mind. See, I thought I might be wrong.
Good question.
Yeah, I was hoping that they could do something like, is this a laser? Something in the line of making this line right here and then calling this an additional side yard instead of a front yard.
Right, yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well,
Because it's a cul-de-sac that takes it out, right?
right, yeah, and it's just that whole irregular thing is considered my front yard as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Based on what I've heard you saying, I would recommend that you either probably, well, as we did last time, either deny the variance or table it and give the staff specific direction to work on the ordinance. Maybe even tell us sooner rather than later to address what was.
I was going to ask if denying it
Uncontested
might
and
sit and then we
routine and
turn around and
uncontested
make it
type.
work.
Doesn't it good though?
It's not
issues.
going to come. If it comes back, we're saying no anyway.
I don't think there's any reason to table it, is there? Do we have some concern that we're going to?
There's nothing that's going to change
No,
it that's
that's
going
what
to
I'm
make us
saying.
approve the variance. I mean, that's just.
It would give them a chance, and they come back, and it would be a new ordinance that we then could accept
Well,
it.
I mean, if we whether we table it or deny it, they're not going to come back anyway if the ordinance gets changed. The ordinance gets changed, and then they can it's just permitted, and they do what they want to do.
As happened last week,
Yeah, that's
the
what we
last
did.
meeting.
Yeah, they didn't come back for the variance, they came back for the.
They came back to
Yeah,
subdivision,
we
and so the
denied it
variance
last
goes
time.
away. If that didn't work, they still wanted the opportunity to come back and pursue the variance.
Yeah.
That's the only reason to table it.
Which I would say no. I mean, it just can't meet
you're
those
gonna-
five. It just
If you're gonna
can't.
deny it anyway, then just deny it, and we'll try the other approach. But
Because we denied the one last time. We didn't
You
table it.
never voted. You tabled it
Oh, we
last
tabled
time.
it?
Yeah, we did
Oh,
table it.
okay. I thought we denied it. Maybe it's because we just
And
thought
simply,
that that's
they
what
wanted,
would
they wanted that
happen.
option available to them if the other options all failed. They didn't want to close that door completely, even though it was already
Just seems
close.
less
Can I
harsh.
ask you the really most stupid question here?
Sure.
Why is this hard five rules? Is it because of lawyers, that what they might do?
Well, we can blame it on lawyers, but it's also the state. It's state legislature.
It's state law.
It's a state law. Yeah.
Okay, I just don't understand that.
So lawyers.
I just was hoping it was
Most
a
of them
common
aren't
sense
lawyers.
thing. And it would,
I know.
Well, I agree,
Developer.
and that's where I'm trying to make. I think we are trying to make it a common sense thing, but we can't, of course, change the law, state law as it is. So we're trying to bypass what maybe should be common sense there and say, let's make common sense here so that you can do what you want to do.
I think the reason why it's so difficult is the state legislature is trying to respect the city's ability to zone and make land use decisions. And so they say, look, we're going to allow you to override the city's ordinances, but you got to meet a very specific list of circumstances before we'll let you override what the city's put in place.
And your best bet may be go to the utility company. Maybe they have some discretion and can let you build 18 inches over the easement, and then you don't have to come back here.
Yeah, that's
Well,
what I was
18
Your setback
inches
is
wouldn't
fine.
do it, though, would it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think they might have a hard time with my guess. Here's my guess, just total guess. My guess is they would, at least the gas line and maybe the irrigation easement, they'll say, no, you can't build over it. So then the two options are is you just A, drop it, or B, you say, well, what if we move the lines? Move them so we can do what we want to do. That might be a hard sell, but you can move the lines, and it would cost money.
It would cost a little money,
Right.
too, yeah.
So again, I that's an option on the table, but it's not a very viable one, and I think changing the code is the most viable.
Yeah, so to me, the difference in where we did table it was because they had the option to go and negotiate with their neighbor to acquire that extra
Property, right.
property they needed. Where here, we don't necessarily have that option. So really, aside from getting an easement approval to cross over on that, the only other option is to change the city ordinance on that.
Well, and you're not building over the
Yeah.
pipeline. You're building over the 10-foot
Yeah, the 10-foot easement.
setback from the pipeline. You're on the
should build
easement,
over
but
the
you're still 8.5 feet from
Yeah.
the pipeline.
Yeah.
Maybe they have some discretion that they can.
Or maybe you don't.
We can't. I don't know whether they can
I
or not.
did contact them when I was first starting to do this, and they basically said, whatever, I had to come through you guys to do anything. I mean, whoever
Tell them
I'm
we
talking to-
said you could build right over their easement.
No, we didn't say that.
No, we did
But you might just decide to do it on your own.
But what we said is we don't care if you build over their easement. It's not our easement.
It's not our easement.
Yeah, what we would normally do, just for conversation's sake, if he had a letter that's essentially approval to encroach within their easement during our building permit review, if the easement owner allows it, then we could permit it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
If they
you
give you
don't-
the easement, yeah, I'd
You would
approve it.
deny the permit based on the infringement on the easement?
Yes, where there's a known easement without permission from that easement holder, we wouldn't grant permission to build there, so we would require something from the entity. But if they provide it, then we allow building.
So even if we
easements.
granted this, I mean, we don't have the right, well, never mind, that was,
They'd still be,
never mind,
they'd
yeah.
still be 10 feet
Yeah.
from their easement. They'd be okay that way.
Do you have enough direction staff from us?
Should we give up?
I think so.
I'm going to move that we deny the variance.
I do, which is basic. So this is staff.
Yes.
Correct,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
And how long does this process take? Is this one of those drawn out for 5 years?
No.
Or
Not 5 years, but maybe 5 months.
3.5 years. No, I'm just kidding.
It could be.
No, I'm
It could be a few
No,
months.
no.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, things get.
And it's a city council thing too, so.
The city
We
council
don't
will be the ones
control-
ultimately deciding. And so if I had a crystal ball and they know, they have much more experience with the process than me, I would say probably at least a few months.
Okay, so we kind of have an idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't put it up for sale yet.
How do we get it on their agenda? Are you?
Well,
You could talk to them.
Yeah, and with the motion, we'll direct the staff to look at it and address it and try to come up with something, then they'll bring it back to us when it's ready, and we recommend, look at it and recommend approval or denial, that it goes to the city council, then they ultimately vote on it as a legislative body.
Just want to know how I can find out whether it happened.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
keep
we can
track.
keep you in the loop and
They'll
we'll
let
keep you
know.
informed.
Check in with them
All right.
periodically. But I do think it's worthwhile to think about some alternatives too, as far as
I
shape
have.
or
I've
location.
thought about tearing out all the landscaping I've done on the other side and trying to make it work, and that's really not.
It'll be an eyesore to the.
Yeah, well, I think
No, that's a good location. I get that.
Well, our neighbors are like, yes, please build it there.
you're
Our ugly spot.
you're probably going back to the easement holders and seeing if they grant you an encroachment on the easement.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. But.
So who do you contact though?
Yeah, it's all
Whoever the easement is, I think you said what?
Yeah,
Dominion Energy.
Well, the first one would be the gas line, right?
Is
Yeah.
it the building to the south of you? Is that the easement holder for the irrigation line? Is that benchland irrigation?
Benchline, that is.
Or is that Farmington area?
That's
Farmington
Farmington
area
area.
pressurized irrigation?
Which is now Benchland, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Benchland is right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
So is that the first one or the gas line?
You're right, Josh. Josh, don't read that. It's not. It is Benchland.
Oh, okay. So you could just go knock on their door, but the gas line one's different.
Knock on the door every day.
Yeah.
9,
Till they
10,
give it to
11,
you.
12.
I have a fairly good relationship with the Benchland people. But,
Yeah.
Didn't he do an agreement that if
So-
there's a problem, they could do something with
Yeah,
the shed?
well, no, I mean, it's, you have the difficulty of dealing with an institutional bureaucracy. If you can take that aside, it would be, I'm an attorney, I think it'd be very easy to draft a situation where you say, look, we're not going to do this, we're going to do this. If you need access, we'll grant you access. If you need to take down our building to do it, we'll let you take down our building. There's all these kinds of agreements you can reach, but I don't want to encourage you too much because they're famous for saying, oh, no, you can't. My boss won't let me do that.
Bureaucracy at its finest.
Yeah. But I mean, I think getting creative, I think changing the shape of your building or access or whatever is, a likely way to do it.
Yeah, I may be able to figure out something.
Yeah.
So did you
make
make a motion?
I did, but it has gone without being seconded.
I'll second it.
Oh.
Yeah, aye.
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 What was it again?
Deny the variance.
Yeah,
Deny the
aye.
variance.
Aye.
But city staff.
We'll be in contact. I'll probably give you a call.
Hey, the public can't leave. We need to call on you.
I was going to move, we deny, that we waive the call to the public.
No public left. Okay, other matters?
I don't have any specific news or items to report, so unless there are items from the agenda, we're just rotating on our normal schedule.
So we're looking at May what? May 10th?
I'm going to be gone.
Don't tell me. You're going to be in Nebraska.
Yes, I will.
Knew it.
McCook, Nebraska. Pretty
Right.
exciting place.
McCook?
Have we looked any more about computers?
It's been a while since we've had the conversation. Is there still interest from the commission in utilizing them?
I went to Clearfield, and they look very smart up there.
Do we look dumb?
Come on, Betty.
That's not just computers, though, Betty.
So that's
if you have a screen that would cover my face, that might work. Yeah.
and it would be good looking too.
Smart in the different contexts, like he's a very smart dresser, that type of thing.
Thank you. Oh, and what did you say, Andy? They were ordered?
We act smart. We don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, apparently so.
Yeah, if there's interest, we could bring it back up. I forget where the conversation's let off. I think there's some ability to do it. I think there's
They just
some
laugh.
concerns and
Do
conversation,
we
but
want to all just bring our own?
No, we
That
want to
doesn't
look uniform.
Yeah.
We're going to dress the same too. Let's.
We get
No.
sponsored.
Yeah.
We got a Nestle Pure Life is sponsoring us.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right.
Who wants to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Thanks.